Welcome everybody, this is Rafa with Mystic Times, and I am very happy to be with you once again. Today I have a great show for you, a great presentation for you on the idea of enlightenment, this spiritual concept, so elusive, so hard to define sometimes. And first of all, I want to share my own experience with this idea. Along my own spiritual journey, it's gone from something very magical, very mystical and esoteric, something kind of unreachable. It's gone to mean something more mundane, more natural. You know, it used to be something that you had to work for, because it was something outside of you, or something that was different from myself. But nowadays I understand it to be something more ever-present, something that's actually covered by our mind, by our attention, our focus on other things, other more material things sometimes, but also by our emotional attachments. Enlightenment nowadays feels, every day it feels more and more natural, more and more original, and more identical with who I am, with who you are, with who each one of us in our deepest and more truest nature is. So I want to give you guys a moment to just reflect on the idea of enlightenment. What is enlightenment for you? Have you ever heard of this term, and how do you relate to this idea, to this possibility of human expression? Take just some time to look within, to ask yourself this question and answer it. And meanwhile, I'm gonna go start sharing my screen, because I want to give, let me see, where is this? Okay, yeah, here we are. Let me see, closing this. All right, here we go. Here it is. I would like to start first off with a very simple, or just a first approach to enlightenment and the idea of it. So we're going to go with Wikipedia, just to get a first approximation, or a first approach to this concept. So let me just read this. It says, used in a religious sense, enlightenment translates several Buddhist terms and concepts, most notably Bodhi, Kensho, and Satori. Let's check that out. So Bodhi, according to this, is awakening, knowledge or wisdom, an awakened intellect. Okay, so Bodhi is your awakened intellect. Then we have Kensho, which comes from the Japanese, and it means to see one's true nature. That's interesting. So we're getting now a third one, Satori, which means comprehension or understanding. So let's look at this as well. Kaivalya, which means detachment. And then we have moksha, which means liberation or freedom. And it shares also that from Zoroastrianism, there's this concept of ushta. So, okay, what we're getting from this is awakened intellect. Awakened intellect. So it's talking about a kind of intellect that is in a different state from our intellect now. We have a sleeping type of intellect. And enlightenment or awakening means awakening that sleeping enlightenment into this awakened state. Then we have Kensho, which talked about seeing one's true nature. So we get a second approximation. So awakening our intellect. What is it asleep to? What is it needing to awaken to? Awakening to our own true nature. And then Satori is comprehension, understanding. So it kind of encompasses both body and Kensho in a certain way, where it says to be enlightened is to understand, to comprehend. We could say to comprehend the truth. Kaivalya says this is connected to detachment, and moksha to liberation. So we see enlightenment has several kind of aspects to it, but they all point to one thing, which is truth, I think. To be enlightened is to be aware of the truth. But what is that truth? What a question. Let's see. Here in Encyclopedia Britannica, I found interesting to check out Neng. Okay, he's a character from the Chan lineage. He's the 6th patriarch of the Chan dynasty, the Chan lineage, sorry, which is, so Buddhism goes from India to China, and then it goes to Japan in this line. So when it goes to China, it's called Chan. And then when it goes to Japan, it's called Zen. People are aware of Zen. And Chan and Zen, they are words connected to Dhyan, which is meditation, or the Sanskrit term that later derives into Chan and Zen. So Neng was a very simple man, a very simple, uneducated man. Here it says, as a young and illiterate peddler of firewood, Neng heard the Diamond Sutra and traveled 500 miles or 800 kilometers to the area in North China where the 5th patriarch of Chan, Hung Gen, around the year 600, was expounding this Diamond Sutra. He then went through a kind of test, we could call it, where they would have to describe what enlightenment was. And one of the other students, which was more of an educated kind of person, he thought he would totally get it with his description. So he said, the mind is the stand of a bright mirror. Do not allow it to become dusty. That's what this other monk, Shen Xiu, wrote. But then this unenlightened, not unenlightened, this ignorant, people might have thought, this illiterate man, Neng, reached this poem that was written on a wall, for example, and he thought about it for a moment and made a few changes and said, Buddha nature is forever clear and pure. Where is there any dust? And from this comprehension, the fifth patriarch understood Neng was the right one to inherit this tradition. So what is the difference here? One of them is saying that your mind is like a mirror and you shouldn't let it get dusty. So he's talking about enlightenment as working on keeping your mirror clear. Because of course we know there's stuff from our past that we carry, there's trauma, there's habitual thinking and habitual patterns that sort of stand between ourselves and our enlightenment. We all get this kind of idea. But Neng went a step further, or a step even behind that, and said, enlightenment, this Buddha nature, is forever clear and pure. What does this mean? If enlightenment is not inherently free, if it's not ever present, it cannot even be, because that is the very nature of enlightenment, is that it's a oneness with truth. It's an understanding truth, and truth is always truth. So if the Buddha nature is forever clear and pure, where is there any dust? It cannot become dusty, is what he's saying, according to my understanding today. So this is another approximation to the idea of enlightenment. And now I wanted to share quotes about enlightenment from different masters that have nurtured my own understanding, my own path. And I've seen it before this. Let me just share. Stop my share. So, different kinds of enlightened beings is one of the things that I've come to see along my path, come to understand that there exists different kinds of enlightened beings. Apparently, it's not totally true, because the Buddha mind is ever clear. It's sameness, it's oneness, it's non-duality. This Buddha mind, what I've seen is it can express itself in different forms. And these different spiritual teachers, they are examples of different appearances of this one truth. Because being enlightened doesn't mean everyone is the same, or there is a uniformity of expression of this enlightenment. But being enlightened is a oneness in truth. It's an awareness of truth, of the true nature of oneself. And it seems from these different masters and teachers that one's true nature is both same and different at the same time. Let me just share what examples of teachers I'm talking about. So number one is Osho, also known as Rajneesh. Osho, you can see from his look, his face, his pictures, he's got this very intense and powerful look or eyes. His eyes are very deep, he's like there but not there. And his story you can check out and find out more about him. But it's a very interesting, let's say, story of a lot of wildness going on around him. Whereas sometimes we think of enlightened beings as calm and peaceful and loving and compassionate in a very one-dimensional, maybe, kind of sense. Osho is a great example that tells us that enlightenment doesn't mean you just are naked in a cave or walking over water and healing the sick and being very compassionate and easygoing. Or I just hear myself saying all of these descriptions, and I'm not saying that they are exclusive or that Osho did not possess all these characteristics, because he did, but we have a very kind of immature definition of all of this. We think, oh, if you're enlightened, then you are not X, Y, or Z. But enlightenment doesn't work quite like that. It's not that you don't have a personality for those who are around you, necessarily. Although, again, there's different kinds of enlightened beings. Let me share this other enlightened being called Ramakrishna from the 1800s. He was more of a kind of blissed out kind of person, or kind of enlightened person. So this is more the kind of enlightened being that we imagine when we imagine an enlightened being. A more easygoing, or like we don't want to accept sometimes that enlightened beings might present us with our crap, our baggage. We think they will just be loving in a fairy tale kind of way, but love and enlightenment can present itself in ways that are uncomfortable for our ego. So let's go back to Osho and let's ask Osho, what is enlightenment? Okay, so over here, down here, we're asking, what is enlightenment according to Osho? Enlightenment is a simple realization that everything is as it should be. Okay? That is the definition of enlightenment. Everything is as it should be. Everything is utterly perfect as it is. That feeling, and you are suddenly at home. Nothing is being missed. So enlightenment is a simple realization that everything is as it should be. So if an enlightened being is not what you expected, that is okay. That is not something wrong with reality. But we will continue to explore this and find what is in common between the definitions of enlightenment by all these masters. Okay, let's go to Ramakrishna. Here in this first quote, he says, only two kinds of people can attain self-knowledge. Those who are not encumbered at all with learning, that is to say, whose minds are not overcrowded with thoughts borrowed from others. And those who, after studying all the scriptures and sciences, have come to realize that they know nothing. Two kinds of people can attain self-knowledge, which is, again, this knowing the truth about ourselves, our true nature, these different words we first expressed here, Bodhi, Kensho, Satori. So Ramakrishna says, only two people can attain self-knowledge. Those whose minds are not overcrowded with thoughts borrowed from others. Okay, so people who are already very simple in their way of being. And there we can find maybe a kind of Neng, a very simple kind of person who was not constantly thinking thoughts, but who heard the Diamond Sutra once, and he immediately knew what he had to do next. He had to go and see the Buddha. And then you have these other kinds of person who are more mental, perhaps, and who, after studying the scriptures and the sciences, they come to realize that they know nothing. That is very interesting. Let me just get one more. Let's see. God is in all men, but all men are not in God. That is why we suffer. Let's think about this idea of God. Let's correlate that with enlightenment. So enlightenment, or the Buddha mind, is in all men, but all men are not in enlightenment. All men have not stabilized their minds in enlightenment, in truth. And therefore we suffer. We suffer because there is confusion in us. There's the four Buddhist noble truths. We suffer because of attachment, and we are attached because we are confused. He says here in this very funny one, do not seek illumination unless you seek it as a man whose hair is on fire seeks a pond. God has revealed to me that only the Paramatman, whom the Vedas describe as the pure soul, is as immutable as Mount Sumeru, unattached and beyond pain and pleasure. There is much confusion in this world of his Maya. One can by no means say that this will come after that, or this will produce that. Ramakrishna is very deep. I recommend you guys, if you're interested, continue searching and reading these quotes from enlightened beings, which will help get a sense of, or deepen that sense of, what it is that the spiritual journey is sort of aiming at or pointing at. Let's now go to Ramana Maharshi. He said, okay, let me just show a couple pictures of him first. In this one, he's saying, your nature is peace and happiness. Remember how in Satori we were talking about understanding one's own true nature. He says, your nature is peace and happiness. Thoughts are the obstacles to realization. Again, just like Ramakrishna talking about a mind crowded with thoughts. Thoughts are the obstacles to realization. A thought must be quelled as soon as it arises, Whenever a thought arises, do not be carried away by it. So here I'm getting this sense again of what is in common between enlightened beings. They do not get carried away by thoughts when they arise. They are not attached to the monologue that presents in the mind. We are the obstacles for quote unquote unenlightened beings is the attachment to these thoughts, which are not truth in themselves, but which are illusory. Like you sit down to meditate and suddenly you take a breath or two and the mind starts with all the to-do list. I need to pay I didn't pay this bill. I said this to this other person. I need to say this to this other person. This happened to me yesterday. This happened to me in my childhood. This is going to happen to me tomorrow. This is not going to happen to me. I will not be able to do this. I will have to do this thing that I don't want to do. The mind starts going crazy. And what he's saying here, what I am understanding and getting from this quote is, when that comes up, we should focus on peace and happiness. Not fight against the thoughts, because that would be another thought, another obstacle. This thought, I must not focus on the thoughts. Be careful. The mind is very astute in that way. So instead of trying to fight the thoughts, focus on the goodness, on the peace and the happiness. That's why in more religious ways of expressing this, they say focus on God. Because the idea is that God is our true nature. Our true nature, let's just call it God. Eventually, as our understanding unfolds and we polish our mirror, eventually, as we practice the spiritual practice, our definitions start to evolve and start to become a little bit loosened, so that we start to understand more about who we are and what God is. So, okay, that was a pretty good one. Let's see this one about surrender. I think this one's going to be pretty cool as well. Complete self-surrender means that you have no further thought of I. Ramana Maharshi was very strong in his teachings of the I. Who am I? That is one of his methods of self-inquiry, asking yourself. So sit down, or even when you're walking, when you're doing stuff, and thoughts arise. I need to do this. This happened to me. Who is I? Who am I? And just ask yourself those questions, and the thing will start to dissolve by itself with time. Just give it time. And this continues. Then all your predispositions, also known as samskaras, all your predispositions are washed off and you are free when you have no further thought of I. You should not continue as a separate entity at the end. Okay, that is very good. And this talks to some of the evolution of my understanding during or along my own spiritual journey. It says, the greatest obstacle to enlightenment is getting past your delusion that you are not already enlightened. Oh, that's a good one. You are already enlightened is what he's saying here. Let's pause for a moment. You are already enlightened. Yeah, but I have all these negative habits and all this baggage, all this unresolved trauma. If we think about it for a moment, we let it sink in. When he says, you are already enlightened. Again, who am I? Am I this little being who believes himself to be full of baggage? Am I the being who carries all that baggage? Or am I something else? It's interesting when we say, I am this, I am that, I am full of this, full of that. There is that I that we're talking about, but then there is that I who is doing the talking. And then there is this I who is simply observing the I doing the talking about the I who carries all that baggage. Try to see that as different levels of who you are, like circles, concentric circles, you know, and the most expansive circle, even actually take it a step further, that circle outside of all the circles, which has no end, no circumference. What's that quote? God is a circle whose circumference is nowhere and whose center is everywhere, something like that. And that is who we are, according to the enlightened beings. They are pointing to our true nature. They have realized this true nature and are established in it and talking from that place. And they are saying, you are that. That's pretty good. Okay, let's move to another enlightened being. This is another one contemporary being who is pretty, how to call it? Again, it's a very different expression of enlightenment, Sadhguru. You know, with his big white beard, he's again a very piercing, powerful gaze. And this quote itself, it says, realization does not take knowledge, it just takes eyes to see. Similar to something that Jesus would say, right? Those who have the eyes to see, or the ears to hear. Let's just get another random one. We're here. It says, enlightenment means, it's bad quality picture, but I can read it. Enlightenment means dissolving your limited personality. No persona means a limitless presence. So we are getting here the word presence alongside enlightenment. You know, being present in the now moment. Many times, you know, the mind, like I said before, it starts going and we are lost in the thoughts and we are not in the world. We are not in the body. We are not in the now of what's happening, but we're actually lost in this illusion that we create in our minds, that we have to focus on all of those things that are not happening right now. This image here, this quote says, there is only one calamity, ignorance, and there is only one solution, enlightenment. Let's see. When your happiness is dependent upon what is happening outside of you, constantly you live as a slave to the external situation. All of these are very, one could call them very basic pointings, very simple truths. But in the day-to-day, it seems we get lost in in our minds, and we forget these basic truths, day-to-day truths. Okay, let's do just one more. Do not think about enlightenment. Look at your limitations and how to go beyond them. That's the way to progress. Okay, that's very good. Don't try to reach enlightenment. You are already enlightened. Instead of trying to reach enlightenment, which by your own definition, it's something that is beyond yourself. It's something you are not. And therefore, your mind will always put the carrot in front of the stick, like I was feeling at the start of my spiritual practice. Instead of putting that, putting it off, putting that ahead of you, live from that place. And from that place, when you discover some of your baggage, some of your limitations, like Sadhguru says here, when you encounter them, watch the mind saying, you have limitations, therefore you're not enlightened, therefore, again, a carrot in front of the stick, therefore you have to search for it. My main point here is trying to see that there are different expressions of enlightenment. And if we are already enlightened, just like the Buddha was enlightened, just like Jesus, just like Krishna, just like Sadhguru, Ramakrishna, Ramana Maharshi, Osho, if we are already enlightened, then what we are is just another different expression of enlightenment. One which, as it looks at itself, as oneself, it sees limitations. And then, rather than sulking and staying in those limitations or letting ourselves be constricted by them, we look at the limitations and accept them as they are. And we look at ways to go beyond them, because we understand we are not those limitations. We are enlightenment. We are that infinite circle outside that contains everything. Ram Dass would call that the witness. It's a great practice to develop the witness. We'll talk about that another time. It's been a great help for me, but I don't want to extend too much. So here is another enlightened being. This is a very, how to describe him? This one is more in the, this one is more similar to perhaps to Osho. There's some controversy around him. His name is Paramahamsa Nithyananda. All right, here's a few pictures. Oh, I like this first one. Your enlightenment is more powerful than your ignorance. Let's always remember that when we see our limitations, let's understand that seeing limitations is actually focusing on our ignorance, and from our enlightenment, diverting power into the ignorance and saying, I am broken. But we're actually giving power to that thought, to that belief, from our enlightenment, our unboundedness, unlimited self. You see the what do you call this? The paradox. What gives power to our ignorance, and we believe it, is our true nature, which is enlightenment itself, and which we are trying to realize and establish into, which means observing our perceived limitations and transcending them with love, not with hate or trying to destroy negatively those limitations, but trying to remember that we are already enlightenment or enlightened. Now let me go to the quotes, and I'm going to search. There was one over here that I wanted to share specifically. Okay, living enlightenment, down here, I'm gonna put it in the center. Living enlightenment is actualizing the limitless potential and experiencing the ultimate as every moment of life unfolds afresh. Living in this divine space is living the best life and doing the greatest service to society. Again, let's also remember always to separate message from messenger. Let's just focus on the quotes and see how they resonate in our soul, inside of us. It doesn't really matter for the truth in the words, or again, as Ramdas would say, listen to the silence between the words. So living enlightenment is actualizing the limitless potential and experiencing the ultimate as every moment of life unfolds afresh. Actualizing the limitless potential, okay, this infinite circle that we are, this witness consciousness, this enlightened presence, this awareness of our true nature. That is the limitless potential. And actualizing that limitless potential, then to experience the ultimate as every moment of life unfolds afresh. So whatever happens now and now and now, I am always experiencing from that space. I am always present in that higher place. Okay, this is from Nithyananda. Now I'm gonna share one final enlightened master, enlightened human being, enlightened person, whatever we want to call them. This is Mooji. Let me just show you a picture. Here we go. Here's Mooji. Okay. This is also a contemporary living master, living teacher, just like Sadhguru and Nithyananda. He comes from the lineage of Ramana Maharshi. Ramana Maharshi, right? This, if I'm remembering correct, Ramana is his teacher's teacher. So let's now get back to Mooji. Let me just move. There we go. Okay, Mooji. If you take yourself to be the body and the mind only, you will die. When you discover yourself as awareness, the fear of death will not trouble you any longer. Okay, let's get into this link and check out some of his quotes. Okay, you can take a few minutes to read. I like this one over here, number 17. Life is so much wiser and kinder than your mind imagines. Trust and be still. and the one before it. To change the world is not your business. We many times we start getting some understandings, and immediately the mind says, okay, use this to change others. So others should also understand this. And paradoxically, if you want others to understand what you understood, then you haven't understood it. Because the bottom line is something like what Mooji is saying here. To change the world is not your business. To change yourself is not your duty. To awaken to your true self is your opportunity. I love how he says it's an opportunity, not a duty. Also, let me see if we can find a few other quotes in here. Whatever comes, do not push it away. When it goes, do not grieve. Okay, so it's again this being present in the moment and open to whatever arises. Just like Ramana said. Dying to your own attachments is a beautiful death, because this death releases you into a real life. You have to die as a seed to live as a tree. Wow, that is very, very Taoist as well, going back to observing nature to understand our own true nature, because we've gone so far into the abstract realm of the mind that we've forgotten our place in nature, our origin in nature. Feelings are just visitors. Let them come and go. Right? If you're aware when thoughts arise, they cause feelings. And when feelings arise, we get stuck in those feelings. We have sometimes difficulty processing them, and they get stuck in the body. And then we carry them all over the place, all over our life. But feelings are just visitors. Let them come and go. If you realize, think about the last time you were feeling bad, feeling sad, feeling hurt, angry. That feeling isn't present here anymore. It's in the past. It's in the mind as a memory. And the next time something similar happens, it will also pass. So stay in the higher place again. Stay in that place of awareness of the present. Be here now. Again, Ramdas. Surrender. Another way to understand enlightenment has to do with surrender. Surrendering, for example, to the emotions that arise, to the thoughts, to whatever happens, whatever comes and goes. Surrender is not a weakness. It is strength. It takes tremendous strength to surrender life to the Supreme, to the cosmic unfolding. Then let's close Mooji segment with, I don't have to be anything at all. I don't even have to be myself, because there is no such thing as not being myself. I am inescapably myself. Oh, and yeah, let's do one final Mooji quote. My love, stay here. Going in search of self as a goal is an illusion. You are already the one self. You will purchase the map only to find you are already here. All right, we spoke about Neng, and yeah, so just to close, I wanted to share a short reading from the Bhagavad Gita. And so Arjuna is asking Krishna, Arjuna said, text number 54, this is chapter 2, verse 54. Arjuna said, "O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak? And what is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk?" So Arjuna is trying to understand, is there one way in common among all the enlightened beings? And Krishna replies, verse 55, and we'll continue forward. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind, thus purified, finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness." Here I'd like to add, satisfaction in the self alone. What can this mean? What can this be pointing at? As I understand it today, this is kind of like Mooji was just saying, whatever comes and goes, accept it, be happy, be peace, which is your true nature, in spite of the movements of the mind and the movements of the outside. One who is not disturbed in mind, even amidst the threefold miseries, or elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called a sage of steady mind. Okay, so not disturbed by suffering, and not elated by happiness. That is a very interesting comparison. You know, life has its ups and its downs. And when you begin the spiritual journey, you begin to live in that zero place, that point where the ups and the downs cross, the axis, the steady zero axis. And those peaks suddenly start to appear, to become smaller in their amplitude. Why? Because our point of reference changes. Instead of riding that wave as a passenger of it, we start to become an observer more and more of that wave. And as an observer of the wave, we can begin to see that it's not as interesting as it seems. It's not as relevant to our true place. Okay. In the material world, Krishna continues, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. Kind of a continuation or an expansion on the previous verse. One who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects, as the tortoise draws its limbs within the shell, is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. So withdrawing the senses from its objects. Again, not being attached to whatever is happening outside or in the mind, but withdrawing them, just like the turtle, okay? Though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remains, but ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. So there is a promise here of a higher taste, a higher tasting experience within. The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind, even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. So if you're endeavoring to control the senses, you are actually playing their game. You are resisting the truth, resisting the moment, and therefore you're not present in the moment, which is apparently a characteristic shared by all enlightened beings. One who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control and fixes his consciousness upon me, is known as a man of steady intelligence. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger rises. From anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. These couple of verses are amazing. I'm going to read them again. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. You know, naturally, what we see, we kind of like or hate. What happens outside, we agree or disagree with. And so we are grasping that and clutched to it and attached to it. And from such from such attachment to the sense objects, lust develops, right? And from lust, anger arises. From anger, complete delusion arises. And from delusion, bewilderment of memory. You know how the confusion starts to appear very clear as how it arises. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So it's a process of our mind, this attachment to the fruits of our actions. But a person free from all attachment and aversion and able to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. For one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. One who is not connected with the Supreme can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? So Ramana Maharshi reminded us, we are happiness, we are peace, but the thoughts are obstacles because we get attached or aversion to those thoughts and we focus uniquely, right, on those thoughts, on the sense objects. And we deliberately, unknowingly, forget our true self, which is peace and happiness, which we already are. But whatever happens in the outside world, all the problems, and also all the accolades and the medals we get, all of that distracts us. Or actually, our focus is distracted by all of that. And all this train arises, you know? Attachment, lust, anger, delusion, bewilderment of memory, loss of intelligence, and then falling down into the material pole. A vicious cycle. But for one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness, in the true nature of a self, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. So being satisfied in the self, so remaining in the present moment, remaining in the self, in the truth. One's intelligence is soon well established. Remaining. So by remaining, what does it mean? It means it's something that we can do. It's our opportunity, I think is the word Mooji used. We can choose to focus on the outside or on the movements of the mind, on the sense objects. We can choose to focus on the self. The self is that part of us which is experiencing life, which is witness, observing and witnessing everything. One who is not connected with the Supreme, this is verse 66, can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace, and how can there be any happiness without peace? As a strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water, even one of the roaming senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. There we're getting something very interesting. If the mind is focused on one of the senses, it gets carried away. And especially what is carried away here, he says, is the intellect. Therefore, O mighty armed, one whose senses are restrained from their objects is certainly of steady intelligence. It doesn't mean don't feel, don't think, don't look, don't hear, don't smell, don't taste, don't touch. It means don't identify with that. Don't get swept away by that. Therefore, touch, but be the witness of that touch, not the experiencer of the touch who gets lost in the sensation, but the witness who is free from attachment or aversion to whatever the sensation is or the sensation feels like. What is night for all beings? Verse 69. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled, and the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage. This is a powerful one. Let's get back to it maybe. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. Okay, don't try to find a particular kind of experience, but be satisfied by whichever river flows into you, the ocean. A person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, who has given up all sense of proprietorship, and is devoid of false ego, he alone can attain real peace. That is the way of the spiritual and godly life, after attaining which a man is not bewildered. If one is thus situated even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. Very powerful chapter 2, the Bhagavad Gita, especially we started on verse 54. Let's look for a moment and then we'll close this presentation. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled, And the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage. What is night for all beings? I think I can start with the second half. In the time of awakening for all beings is the night for the introspective sage. What is the night? What is the awakening time? When all beings are awake is when the senses are being focused upon. That is when we feel awake, when we feel alive, when we are focusing on whatever is happening around us, inside us, in our mental body and in our physical body and our surroundings. When that is active, let's say, we feel awake. And then it's when the introspective sage is in the night, he's asleep. The introspective sage, so your enlightened capacity is asleep when you are focusing on the outside to obtain something from the outside. And the night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-control. So again, when you are awakened, you are not focusing on the sense objects. When you're awakened, you're focusing on the self, on the witness, on the perception of what, on what you're, on the place you're witnessing from. And whatever happens is simply happening. This is a great chapter, and I'm very thankful for everybody that's, if you stuck with this deep episode so far. I want to ask you, please, to comment and let me know what your understanding of enlightenment is, what it has been since you became first aware of this idea. Let me know what understandings might have arisen during this presentation, if there was something in particular that a kind of flip may have switched for you during this presentation. And yeah, use the comment section below to let me know, to share your insights, to share your disagreements with whatever I've been sharing here, to share any insights or understandings that you think might be useful for everyone else. Maybe I wasn't very clear in some areas of this explanation or this presentation, so feel absolutely welcome to share your thoughts, your views, your comprehensions, your experiences. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to speak about all of these subjects that are so dear to me. The new season of the show, Mystic Times, is coming. I'm gonna switch gears a little bit on the next episodes, on the coming episodes. My intention is to become, or to share more practical tips and advice to help all of us reach this understanding and stay with it. So I'm going to try to bring guests, apart from, of course, the amazing guests that have already been on the show and the regular guests that bring their unique perspectives and their unique reflections. I want to start bringing some more practical kind of guests. I mean, I love discussing ideas, and I think it's time to dive deeper and not focus so much only on the ideas and the sense objects, but to see what we can do to become more clear, to become more present in our lives. And I'm searching for Sadhguru's quote, which I think was the greatest. Do not think about enlightenment, look at your limitations and how to go beyond them. That's the way to progress. So I want us all together to look at ways of going beyond our perceived limitations. So thank you so much for being here. If you are enjoying the content, I am also inviting you to check out the Patreon, where I'm sharing exclusive episodes and some other soul nurturing goodies, as I call them, sound healing. And yeah, thank you so much for being there. Thank you for your support. Thank you for subscribing. And remember also to hit the bell for notifications every time I upload a new episode. Thank you so much. I am sending you all of my love, all of my peace and happiness that we share in this deeper aspect and truer aspect of our true nature. Thank you and namaste. Bye-bye.